Hello and welcome back to Soupy Story Time. I still haven't come up with a name for this series where I read you ancient tales. I know I've had plenty of time, but nonetheless, welcome back. A little while ago, I thought I had lost permanently my beloved copy of Tales from the Mabinogion, written by Gwyn Thomas and Kevin Crossley Holland, with illustrations by the wonderful Margaret Jones. But I hadn't. My friend had simply borrowed this copy and then herself forgotten that she had it. So having torn apart Archaeosoup Towers on the hunt for it, I ordered a second copy, which is actually a second edition printing. This is a first printing in 1984, same age as me. And I'm thinking I may well do some sort of competition to give away that second copy. Now that I have to, why not? So keep an eye out for a potential competition in the near future to win a copy of this fine book. But today I want to read for you from the third branch of the Mabinogion, the story of Manawydan, son of Llyr, and in that sense the brother of Bran the Blessed, Bendigeid Bran himself, and also therefore the brother of Branwen, who was grossly mistreated in her marriage to Matholwch, the King of Ireland. You may recall that actually Manawydan and Bran were sat on the coast as the ships approached, with the king on board, and eventually they went to war, and this is how Bran's head ended up in a hill in London. The story picks up from there, but if you want to recap, check out earlier videos in this series. But unless, if you're ready, we shall begin. After the seven men in Branwen's story had buried the head of Bendigeid Bran, Bran the Blessed, in the White Hill in London, with its face looking towards France, Manawydan stared down at the town of London and at his friends, and gave a great sigh, and became very sad and full of longing. "O God Almighty," he said, "woe is me. Everyone has a place to sleep tonight except for me." "My lord," said Pryderi, "don't be sad. Your cousin is the king of the island of the mighty, Britain, and though he has done you wrong, you were never one to claim land and territory for yourself. You are a peaceable man," he said. "Yes," said Manawydan, "even though that man is my cousin, it grieves me to see anyone in place of my brother, Bendigeid Bran, Bran the Blessed. I couldn't be happy in the house of Casballon." "Will you take advice?" asked Pryderi. "I need some kind of advice," said Manawydan. "What advice do you have for me?" "The 7 regions of Dyfed are mine. They were left to me," said Pryderi, "and my mother, Rhiannon, is there. I shall give Rhiannon to you as your wife." "I'll give you my mum as your wife, and I shall also give you authority over the 7 regions. And though you'll have no land except for those 7 regions in Dyfed, there are none better. My wife is Cigva, daughter of Gwyn the Resplendent. And though the kingdoms will be in my name, you and Rhiannon can do whatever you will with them. And if you have ever wanted a kingdom, there are many that are worse regions than those of Dyfed." "I don't want any other land, my lord," said Manawydan. "May God repay you for being such a good friend." "I shall be as good a friend to you as I can be," said Pryderi, "if you want that." And to a modern ear, this may sound as though Pryderi is being obsequious, almost sickeningly servile in handing over this stuff. But actually, he's being a very good friend to a legendary figure and the brother of a literal giant. So I think that's the context of Pryderi handing over the rights to Dyfed. "Indeed, I do want that," said Manawydan, "and I will come with you to meet Rhiannon and to see the land." "You're doing the right thing," said Pryderi. "I don't think you'll ever have heard a woman make better conversation." Okay. And when she was at her best, there was no woman more beautiful than she, and even now you will not be disappointed with her beauty. So they went their way, and at last came to Dyfed, and a feast had been prepared for them at Arberth by Rhiannon and Cigfa. And they sat down together, and Manawydan and Rhiannon began to talk. And while they were talking, Manawydan began to feel affection for her, and to think admiringly that he had never seen a more beautiful woman. "Pryderi," said Manawydan, "I'll agree with what you said." "What was that?" asked Rhiannon. "My lady," said Pryderi, "I have given you to be Manawydan's wife." "I'll agree to that gladly," said Rhiannon. "I'm glad of that," said Manawydan, "and may God repay you, Pryderi, for being such a good friend." Before the end of the feast, they were married. Wow, that was fast. Shotgun wedding. "Finish what is left of the feast," said Pryderi, "and I will go and pay homage to Caswallon, son of Beli, in England." "My lord," said Rhiannon, "Caswallon is in Kent, and you cannot continue the feast until he comes nearer." "If that's so," said Pryderi, "we'll wait." They finished the feast and began to ride through Dyfed, and to hunt and enjoy themselves. And as they travelled through the country, they thought they had never seen a more pleasant place to live in, nor better land for hunting, nor a land more honeyed and fished. And what with all this, such a friendship grew up between the four of them, that none wished to be without the others, by day or by night. In the meantime, Pryderi went to pay homage to Caswallon at Oxford. He was received with joy and with gratitude for his homage. And after he had returned, Pryderi and Manawydan feasted together and spent their time in delight. This is a very sort of structured medieval way of talking. It's almost sort of biblical, isn't it? And then describing sort of social requirements. In this case, paying homage at a certain place and then returning, and so on and so forth. And they began a feast in Arberth, because that was a principal court, and because every important celebration began there. And after the first sitting that evening, while the servants were eating, the four friends went walking, accompanied by a crowd of people. They went to the throne of Arberth, and while they were sitting there, they heard a noise. And because of a noise, a thick mist fell, so they could not see each other. And after the mist, the whole place was filled with light. And when they looked in the direction where the flocks and herds of animals and the houses had been, they could not see anything at all. They could see no animal, no smoke, no fire, no man, not a single house, apart from the court buildings, and those were empty and desolate, with no one in them. And the entire company, apart from the four of them, had disappeared without a trace. "O Lord God," said Manawydan, "where are the people of the court and our companions? Let's go and look for them." When they came to the court, not a soul was there. Then they went to the sleeping chambers. Not a soul was to be seen. In the wine cellar, in the kitchen, nothing but desolation. I do love this picture of the enchantment of Dyfed, with the friends in the throne of Arberth, which is a sort of stone circle on a little hilltop, and the mist descending, and beyond, the court emptied. After a while, the four of them, Manawydan, Pryderi, Cigfa, and Rhiannon, began to eat the food of the feast that was left untouched, because everyone had disappeared. They went out hunting and began to enjoy themselves, and they began to travel through the kingdom to see if any house or habitation remained. They saw nothing but wild animals, and after they had finished their feast and all of the other food that had been prepared, even for the servants, they began to hunt for food, and to eat fish and the honey of swarms of wild bees. For 1 year and a second they were well satisfied with this, but at last they grew tired of it. "Believe me," said Manawydan, "we can't live like this. We must go to England so we can earn a living." I didn't know that there were market forces like this, but like that acting upon them, but okay. And they went towards England and came to Hereford and began to make saddles. Manawydan began to make pommels and to colour them as he had learned from Llasar, the canny barterer, with blue enamel. While saddle work of this kind was available from Manawydan, no one would buy a pommel or a saddle from any other saddler throughout Hereford. He became renowned. All the saddlers realised they were losing their livelihoods, and no one would buy from them except when they could not buy from Manawydan. At this, they met and agreed to kill Manawydan and his friend. But Manawydan and Pryderi were warned about this plot and advised to leave town. "As God is my witness," said Pryderi, "I don't want to leave this town. I want to kill these bondsmen." "No," said Manawydan. "If we were to fight them, we would get ourselves a bad name and be thrown into prison. It's better for us to go to another town to earn our living." And then the four of them went to another place. What craft?" asked Pryderi, "shall we practice here?" "We'll make shields," said Manawydan. "Do we know anything about that?" asked Pryderi. "We'll try it," he said. And they began to make shields, and they coloured them with the blue enamel they had put previously onto saddles and pommels. This work so prospered that no one in the whole town could buy a shield elsewhere unless he was able to buy one from Manawydan and Pryderi. They worked quickly and made many shields. Things went on in this way until their fellow townsmen grew angry with them and agreed to kill them. But Manawydan and Pryderi were warned. They heard the rumour that some men intended to kill them. "Pryderi," said Manawydan, "these men are after our blood." "We need not suffer at the hands of these bondsmen," said Pryderi. "We'll attack and kill them all." "No, we won't," said Manawydan. "Caswatlon and his men would hear about that, and that would be the end of us. We will go to another town." And they came to another town. "What craft shall we practice here?" asked Manawydan. "Whatever craft you like out of those we know," said Pryderi. "We'll try shoemaking," said Manawydan. "Shoemakers won't have the heart to fight with us or to try and stop us. They won't have the soul." "I got soul, but I'm not a..." Sorry. That's not in the story. "I know nothing about that craft," said Pryderi. "I do," said Manawydan, "and I'll teach you to stitch, and we won't bother to dress the leather, but buy it ready dressed and make our shoes with that." Manawydan began to buy Spanish leather, the finest cordwain that he could find in the town. He would buy no other leather except for the soles, and then he began to spend some time with the best goldsmith in town, and he had buckles fashioned for these shoes, and he carefully watched the way the goldsmith worked until he himself had mastered the craft. Oh dear. For as long as a shoe of any kind was to be had from Manawydan, no one would buy from any shoemakers in town, and the shoemakers realised that things were going badly for them because while Manawydan cut the leather, Pryderi stitched it. The shoemakers met to discuss what to do, and they agreed to kill Manawydan and Pryderi. "Pryderi," said Manawydan, these men intend to kill us." "Why should we suffer at the hands of these thieving bondsmen?" asked Pryderi, "instead of killing them all?" "No," said Manawydan, "we won't fight them, and we won't stay in England any longer. We'll go back to Dyfed and survey the kingdom." At last they came to Dyfed and went to Arberth, and they kindled a fire and began to eat and to hunt. They spent a month in this way, having been somewhat nomadic in England for a while. Then they gathered their hounds and went hunting, and lived this way for a further year. One morning, Manawydan and Pryderi got up to go hunting and made their hounds ready, and went out of the court. Some of the hounds ran ahead of them and went into a little copse nearby, and no sooner had they got into the copse than they beat a hasty retreat, with their hair standing on end, and ran back to the men. "We'll go nearer the copse," said Pryderi, "to see what's actually in there." They came nearer to the copse, and when they approached it, a shining white wild boar rushed out. The men urged the hounds to close in on the boar, and the boar retreated some way away from the men. And if the men kept their distance, the boar would turn and face the hounds, fearless before them. And when the men came near, the boar would retreat again and not stand his ground. Another wonderful picture here, the boar hunt with Manawydan and Pryderi and the hounds. And they followed the boar until they saw a huge and lofty fort, newly built. And this was in a place where they'd never seen a fort, or a stone even, for that matter, laid on the ground. The boar went quickly into the fort, followed by the hounds. And after the boar and the hounds had gone into the fort, the men began to marvel at the sight of the fort in a place where they'd never seen a building before. And from the top of the mound they looked and listened for the hounds. But though they stayed there, they heard no sound of the hounds, nor saw any sign of them coming from the fort. "My lord," said Pryderi, "I'll go into the fort and see if the hounds are there." "Indeed," said Manawydan, "I don't think that's a good idea. We've never seen this fort before, and if you take my advice, you will not go into it. Whoever has cast a spell on this land has also caused this fort to appear here." "Believe me," said Pryderi, I'm not going to lose my pack of hounds." Despite all Manawydan's advice, Pryderi insisted on going towards the fort. When he came to it, there was not a man nor a beast inside it, not a boar, nor the hounds, nor a house, or any place to live or lay one's head. Near the middle of the grounds of the fort, Pryderi could see a well with marble work around it, and just by the well could see a golden cauldron held by 4 chains and hanging above a marble slab. And the chains went up to the sky, and he could see no end to them. Pryderi began to marvel at the beauty of the gold and the splendid workmanship of the cauldron. His hands stuck fast to it, and his feet stuck to the place where he was standing, and he lost his voice, so that he could not utter a word, and that is how he was stuck there. Manawydan waited for him almost until the end of the day, and late in the afternoon, when he was certain he would hear nothing from Pryderi or his hounds, he went back to the court, and when he returned, Rhiannon looked at him. "Where," she asked, "is your friend and your hounds?" "This," he said, "is my story," and told it all. "Indeed," said Rhiannon, "you've been a bad friend, and you've lost a good friend." And with that, out she went. She went in the direction of the fort that had not previously been there, as Manawydan described it. And that is the end of part 1. I'll pick up next week with the end of this particular story. It's a beautiful story, isn't it? And as all great old stories, it has a lot of repetition, a lot of reinforcing of the actions of both our heroes and the people who are looking to kill them, apparently for being too good at any craft that they take their hands to. And you can feel how this would become almost like a pantomime in the telling of the story. You know, like people know to say, "Oh no, he didn't," in a pantomime, "Oh, it's behind you." Well, with repetition, people get to go, "Oh, they're gonna kill them," and get involved in the tale. So we'll see what happens in part 2. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, do take care. Bye bye. Consider supporting Archaeosoup on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Link available in the video description.